You know, there are all kinds of opportunities to be encouraged by the work that goes on in this congregation. And when I see a father and son team get up, and I don't mean this in any way other than the way it's given, folks. It is scary getting up here and exposing yourself in a spiritual kind of way, exposing yourself in front of everybody in this audience. And you're not much more exposed than when you were singing, because that's coming from the heart. And when I hear brothers and sisters and people who are getting up, doing things that are not in their normal wheelhouse, I can't help but be encouraged. Amen. I cannot help but be encouraged. And that's what I want you to be thinking about with this lesson. That's what I want you to be thinking about with this lesson, because we're going to be talking about Romans chapter 1. And as we look at Romans chapter 1, a lot of people are afraid of Romans for some reason. They say it's too spiritual. I don't like to read that. Well, I don't care. We're going to read it. So let's get started. Now, the last time I got up, we were talking about how the Apostle Paul was introducing himself to the church at Rome, how he had never met these people. He doesn't know them from anybody, and yet he's saying, I can't wait to come and visit you. So let's start in verse 8. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world. For as God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I mention you, always in my prayers, asking that somehow that by God's will I will now at last succeed in coming to you. For I long to see you. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to strengthen you. That is, that we may mutually be encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. I want you to know, brothers, that I have often intended to come to you, but thus far I have been prevented, in order that I may reap some harvest among you as well as the rest of the Gentiles. I am under obligation both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise and to the foolish. So I am eager to preach the gospel to you as well. Okay, that's a rather lengthy passage, but in it you can feel Paul's passion, one, for what he does, and the passion that he has to come and visit the brothers and sisters in Rome, and how important that is to him. Okay, so I want to mention in particular 3 things that he said in this particular passage, and I want us to be very mindful of them. 1, he is constantly praying for them, and he uses the term, for as God is my witness. That's pretty powerful words. That's invoking the name of the Almighty and saying, I want to come see you. Longing to see them. And then to be encouraged by them as he strives to encourage them. Okay, what can we learn from these words? I can think of 3 blessings right now that we can put to use in our church, right here at Overland, and in our community. First, the idea of mindfulness. Thinking about people. And to be able to do that justice, obviously you have to know something about them, right? Okay. How are we handling our mindfulness with our brothers and sisters? How many times do we talk about in our prayer list brothers and sisters who've been on that list for a long, long time, and we don't have the foggiest idea really how things are going with them? I'm not saying this to try to dig or create guilt or anything like that. It's called human nature. But Paul is saying, I want you to rise beyond the human nature. I want us to long for each other. I want us to be mindful of each other. And I want us to just be there for each other. That's extremely important. And that's, in today's day and age, today's society, that's becoming a lost art. I don't know how many times I listen to people talking and I hear about them saying, yeah, my mom and dad were in a nursing home during COVID and I didn't get to see them. Or talk to the mother and dad in the hospital and they say, nobody came to see me. Nobody came to call. Folks, in the church, that should not be what we're known for. Blessing number 1, mindfulness. Be aware. Blessing number 2, prayer. Oh, we say prayers all the time. I'm not talking about that kind of prayer. I'm not talking about that. Praying for the church. Praying for others. Praying for the opening of doors, not to be served, but to serve. Prayers for our nation, prayers for our community, prayers for a world that has gone absolutely bonkers. If you would, turn to the book of Jeremiah. I want you to listen to the admonishment that Jeremiah gives to Judah as it's being carried off into Babylonian captivity. You would think that Jeremiah would say, okay, you guys, you need to rise up. You need to rebel. You need to do something. Sound the war cry. All this business. But oh no. In Jeremiah 29, in verse 5, and I'm going to start in verse 4, it says, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. You're not going to Babylon because of the power of Nebuchadnezzar. You're going to Babylon because of what you did to me, and I'm sending you there. Let's get the story straight here. Verse 5. This is what I want you to do while you're there. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. Verse 7, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. And this is the key. For in its welfare will you find yours. We're going to go to Babylon, and you want us to pray for Babylon? Yeah, you're going to spend the next 70 years there. Get used to it. Pray for them, because if they do well, you will do well. That's not exactly the kind of mindset that that people's going off into captivity are normally told to have. Instead of actively seeking rebellion, revenge, all of those things that humans do all the time, it's just the opposite. Mindfulness, prayer. And the last thing, next to the last thing, presence. Now, presence is Presence, not the word that you get at Christmas. The whole idea of we can never, ever, ever neglect the power of our presence with our brothers and sisters. And that is more and more and more important day by day by day by day, because as a nation we're becoming so isolated it's scary. And yet the church can turn that isolation into promise. That church can turn that isolation into something that people will forsake and come and join and be part of, be family, in a world that's missing the concept of family so terribly. Okay, and I'm going to use the verse that everybody knows, and you're going to say, I knew it, he's going to be preaching from Hebrews. Yeah, I am. Doesn't bother me. In Hebrews, we want to turn and we want to look at that because that's extremely important. Presence is something that we need to be very much aware of. Starting in verse 24. Once again, this is very familiar to us. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Well, what's he talking about here? The whole idea is that we are consciously looking for opportunities to encourage each other by our presence so that everyone will want to share in that enthusiasm. I had a great example of that this morning. You know, everybody's gathering together for worship, and we've not had Sunday morning Bible class ever since we went into lockdown. And we've realized that, we don't have teachers. We don't have students. We got all kinds of excuses, right? We had a high school class that met this morning before church. We didn't ask them to. They did it on their own. That's the kind of encouragement I'm talking about. People who are saying, I will not let the world dictate what it does to me. This is the church. And we draw the line in the sand. So to the youth group, thank you. That was a shot in the arm that I think everybody needs. Everybody needs. Okay, now let's turn to another passage, 1 Peter. Why is it so important that we talk about attending church all the time? Because we forget. We let life get us down. We let life do things to us. We got busy schedules. We got all of these kinds of excuses that are in the way. And yes, I'm using the word excuse. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But in verse 6 of 1 Peter, chapter 5, it says, Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, Cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kind of suffering is being experienced by the brotherhood throughout the world. I love in Doug's community remarks, he talked about how a continuous worship is being experienced, being accomplished throughout the world. So if you were to go to Greenwich, England, right at the prime meridian, and then you were starting to travel westward, it's going to take 24 hours for this old world to turn around. But isn't it comforting to know that there will still be people worshiping 24/7? And as brothers and sisters, as Christians, we're part of that. And ladies and gentlemen, that's something to be so excited about. So excited about. But let's read on about this. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion. You can read where Paul talks about having fought wild beasts in Ephesus. You can also read in 2 Timothy where he escaped the lion's mouth. You almost get the impression that Paul had an intimate knowledge of the business end of a lion there. And he's saying the devil is just like that roaring lion. So if we take that analogy and we apply it to our congregation, if we had Mother Nature walk through that door of our congregation, that would be something that would really get our attention, wouldn't it? But when we're out in the world and we're doing all the things that the world catches us into, where would be the most likely targets of a roaring lion? Well, you just look at him. The lion out in the wild is going to attack the weak, the isolated, those who are away from the herd. And the lion's kind of an equal opportunity kind of person or lion, and he's going to attack anything that he has the opportunity to attack. So what does that mean to the church? We need to protect each other, and there's safety in numbers. There's safety in numbers. All of these things come to mind when I go through these passages, and I see that we need to be taking care of our brothers and sisters. We need to be taking care of each other more than, and I don't mean this at Overland, I mean this worldwide. We need to be taking care of each other much more than what we are now. And then in the last portion, 1 Peter chapter 5, in verse 9, it says, resist him firm in your faith, knowing that at the same time, these same sufferings are happening to everybody around the world. And in verse 10, it says, and after you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ Jesus, will himself confirm, strengthen, and establish you. And to him be dominion forever and ever. Amen. Safety in numbers. defending each other. And God recognizes that, and we will be rewarded for that as a church. How do we do this? How do we go about doing this? Well, the answer is simple, but it's also very complicated in its simpleness. Because if you go to verses 16 and 17 of Romans chapter 1, you have to understand all of this, the mindfulness, the prayerfulness, and the presence requires faith on our part. I have a problem with the English language. The English language is a perfectly good language. It is the language probably closest to an international language that we have today. But there are concepts of English that don't work well with other languages. Now, Greek, for example, they have several different meanings for the word, or several different words for like worship, love. And we try to express those complex concepts with one word. I love to hear a baby cry. I love to hear a baby cry. Those concepts that we struggle with our English, we need to be careful with. For example, that word faith, because when we get to it, faith, in the Greek, pistos. The word does, the word's fine, no problem with it. But the way it's translated in English, this is what bothers me. Because when it says in verse 16 of Romans, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for the salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith by faith, from faith to faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. I have the English Standard Version right here that I'm reading from, and it says, the righteous shall live by faith. Does anybody have the NIV? What does it say? This is the audience participation part of the class. Live by faith. Okay. Most of the English language translations that we have available live by faith. The Greek doesn't put it that way. If you go to an interlinear and you look at that passage, it says, the righteous by faith will live. It puts emphasis on the faith part, not the living. On the faith part. Now let's look at that. How could Noah, who was a man of faith, considered righteous in the sight of God in a world that was absolutely out of its mind, how could Noah determine to build an ark for over 100 years and maintain that kind of dedication, to see it through to completion? Faith. The faith is how he lived. How could Abraham, this one I have problems with. How could Abraham pack up his animals with his servants and his son and go off to a place called Mount Moriah to sacrifice his son? his only son. Did he tell Sarah what he was getting ready to do? We don't know. That's the part I have trouble with. Now, what drove, I'm using the word deliberately, what drove Abraham to do that? His faith. Go to Hebrews again, chapter 11, and you find out exactly why he did it. But let's talk about another one that we don't normally talk about. But this example of faith is one of the strongest I've ever seen, at least in my humble opinion. If you go to the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. And the first 2 chapters of that book, of the Old Testament, is talking about the story of a woman named Hannah. And Hannah was married, but Hannah was barren. She could not bear children. And this was a heavy weight upon her. And she would go to the tabernacle every year with her family to offer sacrifices. And one year it was she couldn't take any more. And she went back into the temple area or the tabernacle area, and she was praying and she was crying and this was all going on in her heart. And Eli, who was the high priest at the time, saw this, and he goes up and he rebukes her and he says, "Woman, you're hitting the bottle way too much." That's definitely a paraphrase. "Why are you drunk? You need to put away your wine." And Hannah, I bet there was some fire in her voice when she responded to him. "Oh no, I'm not drunk." And then she told Eli her situation. And Eli said, "Go, and may the Lord do to you as you have asked." Hannah bore a son. God opened her womb. God answered her prayer. But Hannah told God that I will give him to you, and he will serve you all the days of his life. And God answered that prayer. Ladies, mothers, grandmothers, would you have the faith to give up your son? To give up any child, even when you promised the Lord? Yet Hannah did. Why? Because by faith she lived. By faith. The faith was the driver, not the living. The faith was the driver. And that's what I want us to key in on here. Because when we talk about being mindful of our brothers and sisters and our community and having them in our prayers continually and being present, that's going to require some decision on our part. And that decision is going to be, am I going to live by faith, or am I going to let my faith dictate how I live? And that's 2 completely different concepts. It places emphasis in 2 completely different directions. So you have to ask yourself the question, how am I doing? Is there a need for improvement in my life? Or should I just recognize that I'm doing a lousy job and ask for prayers for myself? And if that's the case, we'll have to get more pews because it'll be very crowded up here. We all fall into that category. But the whole idea here is that we have got to look into the mirror and see ourselves as we really are, and then understand that the Lord has an expectation that is above and beyond what we think. And then we should strive to meet the Lord's expectation. Mindfulness, prayer, presence, and a faith that drives all three. If we can help you in any way this morning, please come forward while we stand and sing.